pick out a few deals that really stood out for you, ones that maybe took interest or you thought really characterized the year on the whole, and kind of reflect on those. You can fire a few off or go one by one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably two or three themes last year, I would say, from what kind of happened in the M&A world. I think one theme was companies that were looking for growth and to acquire or invest in growth. I think a big theme was companies that were looking to focus their portfolio by maybe divesting of some brands that weren't a core or a priority for them anymore. And I think third was maybe some stuff that was more opportunistic. I mean, I'll start with the one that I'm a little more biased towards. So full disclosure, I mean, we advised BuzzBalls in their sale to Sazerac last year. And that one was obviously fascinating from multiple angles. I think BuzzBalls, first of all, phenomenal brand. What Marilee has done to build that was absolutely exceptional. And I'm not still sure how she even did it in a time when the RTD term didn't exist when she started the brand. But, BuzzBalls is sort of a perfect, I think, analog of the RTD world today. It's a brand that's really hard to define because it comes in this very unique packaging, but the liquid could be really any color, any flavor that they want to make based on whatever the consumer wants today, according to their opinion. They can make it with any alcohol base, and they do. They've got a brand. They sell it with a spirits-based version, a wine-based version, and a malt-based version. So they've got a brand that can effectively be customized for any flavor. They can go into any channel, whether that channel is allowed to sell legally spirits, wine, or beer, and meet the price point, meet the consumer where they are, in a convenient format. So I think that brand is a perfect sort of encapsulation of what's happening within RTD. There's almost no rules in RTD. You don't have to go down a traditional flavor line. You could have a brand that has cocktail flavors and fruit flavors and confectionery flavors, and you could jam them all together. And the consumer has clearly given that brand permission to do that. I think there's certain brands the consumer believes, I think you're a canned cocktail. I think you fit this profile, this need state, this occasion. And there are certain brands the consumer says, look, I think if you make something that tastes good, I don't care exactly what it looks like or what you call it, but if it fits the price point and the occasion and the flavor profile, I'm going to acquire it. So anyways, I think BuzzBall is a fascinating one. I think because the brand itself is fascinating. I think also if you look at the acquirer on that, I think there's an interesting trend last year. The biggest acquirers in general of brands were Gallo and Sazerac. It was an interesting year where there weren't a lot of large publicly traded international spirits companies doing a lot of acquisitions. I think they had their own portfolio concerns. They were dealing with destocking, maybe dealing with distributor retailer issues, maybe management changes. So there's a lot of, I think, external and internal sort of volatility. But what we saw was, the two biggest private companies within wine and spirits were the two that stepped up and started making some pretty interesting things happen. Gallo made several RTD and spirits acquisitions last year. Sazerac acquires BuzzBalls on one end, super high growth, super premium. And then, a couple months later, they go and they acquire Svedka, which is a much simpler portfolio, less premium, obviously not growing. But Gallo and Sazerac have shown they have the appetite to do things that are, high growth founder-owned brands, and they're also willing to acquire brands that are corporate carve-outs from big suppliers and big competitors. And I think sort of that's an interesting sort of, I think, microcosm of what's happening right now, at least in 2024. Again, the big spirits companies all had different levels of distraction, internal thinking. They were trying to re-strategize around different categories and how they think about different geographies and different categories and portfolios. And then you had Gallo and Sazerac who, out there were doing things in a very nimble, creative way. So I think that's an interesting sort of theme by itself. I think if you look at some other things that were, again, either maybe more on the opportunistic side, or sometimes the more distressed side. I mean, you saw Duckhorn go private again. I think that was a successful exit to go private. I think they were successful as a public company. But clearly it is really hard to be a publicly traded company when you're not at the scale of a Diageo or a Molson Coors or an AB. You sort of saw the opposite happen with Vintage Wine Estates. I'm not saying it's not their fault, I don't think, but it's really hard to be a small publicly traded company. It's just tough having all the demands of shareholders that are public and quarterly earnings, and also to be a high growth, relatively small mid-sized company. So I think you saw some things there that were more opportunistic on a distressed side and a non-distressed side. And then, I think what's interesting too last year is a lot of the deals that didn't happen. There was a lot of chatter last year about some other large spirits companies that were thinking about, selling off certain brands and may have even explored it. Most of those deals didn't happen, but I do think that thinking still exists, and I think as long as the destocking trends and the general sort of I would say consumer uncertainty is out there, I think you're going to see more big companies still considering, if they've got a good buyer for a brand that's not priority anymore, could you sell that off, make a profit on it, and then refocus your entire organization on fewer brands that have more potential?